If you've been on a sandwich bender lately and you've run out of mustard, I'm going to show you how to make your very own from scratch at home using raw mustard seeds, Canadian grown yellow and brown mustard seeds. I'm going to turn it into everything from honey mustard to coarse grainy farmer German mustard to baseball park hot dog yellow mustard, and yes, I'm even going to show you how to make the mysterious French Dijon mustard, all from just these two seeds. Stay tuned. Hello people of the sandwich pipes, I'm Mr. Spork, and these are Mr. Spork's hands. Making mustard at home is incredibly simple. It's one of those things that a lot of people wrap in mystery and they think there's all sorts of crazy alchemy that has to happen, but nothing could be farther from the truth. It's as easy as falling off of a sandwich. All you do for any style of mustard, really, same process. You take raw mustard seeds, you soak them for a while in water or wine, depending on the style you're making, and then you grind them down. And once you grind them, that's going to start a natural chemical reaction inside the seeds that gives you the heat and the flavor. At a certain point after that, you're going to stop that reaction by using acid, usually vinegar, and that's going to lock that flavor and heat in suspension. Then you're going to let the mustard mature for anywhere from a few days to a few weeks before it gets really, really tasty. So for making a basic coarse grainy mustard like this German style farmer's mustard, if you want to call it that, you take a 50-50 mix of the two different seeds. Now, the difference in the seeds, these are Canadian grown, by the way. Canada does more mustard seed production than anybody else in the planet. It's 150,000 tons a year, I think. The yellow mustard seeds are a little bit milder than the brown mustard seeds. It's not a huge difference, and in fact, that difference can be completely eclipsed by how you process the seeds and how long you let that reaction happen. But basically, milder, you use yellow. Hotter, you use brown, and if you have access to the black, those are even hotter still than the brown mustard seeds. But these two will get you just about everywhere you need on the mustard spectrum. So a 50-50 mix. In my case, I make relatively small batches. So for about a 300 milliliter, what is that, a 1.5 cup batch, I use 40 grams of each. That's about a quarter cup of each 50-50 mix. And then for coarse grainy mustard, I'm just going to soak these in cold water. I'm going to use about 3/4 cup or 120 milliliters of cold water. Now I say cold water because cold does not inhibit that chemical reaction at all. If you want to mellow them out a little bit more, just switch your cold water to warm water. So 3/4 cup to 120 milliliters of warm water or cold water, depending on your preference of heat, on top of these, and let them soak for anywhere from 10 to 30 minutes just to get kind of soft before we go into the blender with them. Now, another mustard that a lot of people always are interested in is Dijon style mustard, from originally from Dijon, France, but now it's made all over the planet. And in order to make Dijon mustard, which is what I'm going to grind up for you today, you're going to use a little bit of white wine. So I'm going to take that same volume, about 3/4 cup, 120 milliliters of white wine. Any kind of white wine will do. If you got half a bottle left over from your parties or from your late night sandwich benders, that's fine. And for Dijon mustard, these have to soak a whole lot longer. These have to soak for probably 3 days, 72 hours. In the old days, they used to actually get a little bit of a fermentation happening because they'd use the sour juice, grape juice. Basically, it was unripened grapes that they juice and use that for making the process. But in these days, any sort of reasonable white wine will work. So I'm going to set these aside for 3 days to make some Dijon mustard, and I'll be back to show you what happens after they've softened up. While those seeds soak for the Dijon version of mustard, I'm going to show you the baseball park hot dog yellow mustard real fast. In that case, you're going to use all yellow mustard seeds, no brown in that case, about a half a cup or 80 grams of yellow mustard seeds. You're going to put them in warm water, and we're going to use warm water again because that will inhibit the chemical reaction a bit. And then you're going to let them soak not longer than about 15 minutes. Going to dump them into your super blender, and in with the super blender, you're going to add a teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon of turmeric, and a 1/4 teaspoon of paprika. And I should remind you guys that all of these recipes, if I confuse you with the different versions I'm making today, just go up into the link in the corner there and you'll find my blog where I've got all these recipes laid out for you. You can recreate them easily. Also, for making the yellow mustard seed, since we want it milder, we're going to put the vinegar in right from the start. It's about 1/3 cup, 100 or 80 milliliters of vinegar, I think that's right. We're going to load them into the super blender, and I'm going to show you what that looks like right after this. Okay, so I've got all the ingredients for my hot dog yellow mustard in there. I'm just going to turn this beast on and let it whiz for a good long while. You want it very, very smooth in this case, so probably on a high power blender a good 1.5 to 2 minutes. If your blender's not quite up to speed, you may need to go a little bit longer, and you may need to pass it through a fine mesh strainer afterwards to get the consistency you're after. Sometimes lesser blenders have a hard time getting through those mustard husks, so let's give this a shot. we go, yellow mustard done. If it's not quite coming together, you may need to add just a spoonful or two of water, but how is that for good old-fashioned yellow mustard, good old hot dog mustard, and just about as smooth as could be there. Now remember, this isn't going to taste very good straight out of the blender, so do transfer it into something that you can put in the fridge and let it sit and mature for a few days. Let's go on to the next one. I know some of you out there are probably saying to yourself, why would I waste my time making mustard that I can get for just a couple bucks at the grocery store? Well, you know what? You won't save a whole lot of money, but you will save some, because mustard seeds are dirt cheap. You can get a kilo of the things for a buck or two, and a kilo of mustard seeds will make you a heck of a lot of mustard. I'm talking about 50 cents for a big, huge bottle compared to $2 or $3 at the grocery store. So you're going to save a little bit of money, but more importantly, you're going to know what goes into it, and it's going to be fresher. You're going to be able to control the potency if you get these techniques down, and the best part is that you get to experiment with all kinds of crazy flavors, and that's what I want to show you in these next two recipes. I'm not actually going to blend up batches of these in the blender because, quite frankly, I've got 100 mustard experiments already percolating away in the refrigerator, but the basic coarse grain mustard is the base that I use for all of my wacky flavors. And all that really changes when you're making flavored mustards is what else you throw into the blender. So if you want to make some garlic mustard, you just chuck that into the blender while you're grinding it down. If you want to make some habanero and tequila mustard, you chuck the habaneros in the blender and you use the tequila as the soaking liquid. You can make all kinds of stuff. You can make beer mustard. You can make fresh grated horseradish mustard. You can make ginger mustard. I've seen people make red wine and cranberry mustard. All you do is change the liquid and what else you chuck in the blender, and that's it. One of the most popular flavors, of course, people are going to ask about is honey mustard, and the only trick with honey mustard is that it's kind of hard to get the honey in suspension. So in that case, what I do is I use a glass measuring bowl, and I put the honey in and I microwave it for 30 seconds to really soften it up. Then I put the vinegar from the recipe, whether I'm using cider vinegar or white vinegar, put the vinegar in, stir it around, microwave it for a few seconds just to melt it down a little bit farther, and use that basically honey vinegar in the recipe. That usually works really well. The last little technical thing, though, I need to tell you is the difference between the potency of the hottest mustard and the mildest mustard really isn't as much in the seeds as it is in how you process it. So basically, you've just finished grinding your mustard, you start a timer, right? After 5 minutes, the enzymatic reaction that's making the heat and the flavor in the mustard has pretty much peaked. And the way you stop that enzymatic reaction is by adding the acid and by adding your salt. So if I do that 5 minutes into it, I have locked in every last bit of heat and flavor that those mustard seeds can offer. If I wait 20 minutes or 30 minutes, some people even wait a day before they add in the acid, all of those volatile compounds will have evaporated, or at least a lot of them have evaporated, and it'll give you a milder flavored mustard. So anywhere from 5 minutes to an hour, and you're going to get a pretty significant difference. And if you want really mellow mustard, leave it out on the counter for another day or two before you add in the vinegar and the salt. All right, so those are your basic and most advanced mustard recipes. Again, all these recipes are out on my website. If you want to go check out that blog, you'll get the recipes printed out. I'm going to be back in just a second to show you the mysterious Dijon mustard. Our mustard seed mix for the Dijon recipe has been soaking for a few days now, as you can see. And I just wanted to show you guys real quick, there's a little bit of a slimy outer coating that will come to the surface and become real obvious. You'll see this too if you ever soak in warm water. That's perfectly natural and normal. There's a natural emulsifier in the seed coat of mustard seeds, and we want that. That's what thickens the mustard later on in the process. It's nothing to be alarmed about. You certainly don't want to try to wash it off. So don't let that alarm you. The rest of the Dijon mustard recipe is pretty simple. You're going to use a teaspoon of good sea salt. You're going to use one good healthy size garlic clove and about a quarter of a yellow or white onion. Don't go nuts with these flavors because, again, we're not cooking this. It doesn't take much to overpower, so don't stick in 2 or 3 thinking it's going to be better. Start with that. You can always add more in your next batch if you really want to. And we've got a little bit of apple cider vinegar instead of distilled white vinegar in this case. You're going to use, I think that's 80 milliliters or about 1/3 of a cup. You also might need just a little bit more cold water, but generally speaking, the wine and the cider will be enough liquid. So I'm going to get this loaded up in the blender, and I'm going to set up blender cam so you can see the Dijon come together. I got that batch of Dijon out of the blender. As you can see, it turned out really well. And just to compare and contrast, last week I made this batch. I used all yellow mustard seeds, no brown in this mix, and I decided to throw in some tarragon leaves because that seemed like a really French thing to do, and it turned out really, really well. I like both of those. My all-time favorite honey mustard, my good old school hot dog yellow sunny mustard, and of course the coarse German mustard. All of these, as you can see, dead simple to make. But do remember that straight out of the blender, they're going to be pretty bitter, they're going to be pretty flat, they're not going to have a lot of flavor. You're going to taste them straight out of the blender, I know you are, and you're going to say, oh man, that wacky Canadian, he turned me on to something totally nasty. I promise you, you got to give them a day or two and they will mellow right out and they will have some flavor to them. So don't throw it out thinking you got it wrong. Just give it some time to mature. Be a little patient before your next sandwich. As always, thanks for watching. I do appreciate it. I love doing these things for you. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for watching the blog. Thanks for watching the ad that rolls after this, because that's what lets me keep doing these things for you. As always, I'm Mr. Spork. These are Mr. Spork's hands. Now, go make some mustard for that sandwich.